All right. Hello, everybody. Hello, YouTube. Welcome to the book club for Emergent Strategy. Today's February 1st, 2023, and we're talking about interdependence and decentralization, which are covered in pages 83 to 102. Prepared a little bit of stuff here, so I'm going to share my screen. And yeah, so today's agenda, I thought we would do a little bit of housekeeping items. And this is part of that. Maybe we don't need 10 minutes, and then we'll do a little framing of the conversation. The book does have some really interesting and helpful assessment of X kind of sections, and there was a section for assessment of interdependence and decentralization. I thought it would be interesting to go over and talk about. And I really appreciated previous sessions where we shared quotes and talked about it, so I wanted to do that. And then, of course, leave some time at the end for most elegant next steps. And all that maps out to about an hour. So we're going to try to keep this to an hour so people can get on with their day. And yeah, any questions or comments or thoughts before we kick it off? Let me get you all up so I can see faces. Okay. And I'll just kick it off with some thoughts that I had. It was like talking about interdependence and decentralization. And it was interesting they had both of those words in the chapter title. I tend to think of them as not the same and kind of opposing polarities. We want interdependence because we're building communities and movements and working together as groups, but we also want to decentralize and not have centralized power and all that. So when you start to get into it, I don't think they are opposites. They can be complementary, especially in the kinds of things that we're trying to build here. So I wanted to get into that. I just pulled a few quotes that I thought were really interesting. Humans are unique because we compete when it isn't necessary. We could reason our way to more sustainable processes, but we use our intelligence to outsmart each other. We compete for fun, for ego. And then the idea of interdependence is that we can meet each other's needs in a variety of ways so that we can truly lean on others and they can lean on us. It means we have to decentralize our idea of where solutions and decisions happen and where decisions come from. And this was mentioned last week. Organizing is to the community what spiritual practice is to the individual. And this is my all-time favorite quote from this whole book. It made me, that was kind of one of those paradigm shifting moments for me. I was like, oh my God, that's why we're doing community. It's our spiritual practice. And then last one for me, it's relieving to know that it's not always up to us as individuals, but there's always a complex interconnection of power at play, which is that interdependence piece. But I thought I'd throw it open here just for initial thoughts on the chapters if people have read it. For me, it was really difficult to actually structure a kind of a discussion around it because it was almost like reading her diary or journal, or it was like cut and pasted. It was almost like a collage of ideas and statements and thoughts. And they were all really great, but it didn't have a strong narrative thread for me to hang on to. So it was a little bit challenging for me, but I was wondering how other people found the chapter and what you took away from it.
I hadn't thought about it that way, but the way you just described the writing in the chapter, I wonder how intentional that was, right? Did she write a decentralized piece of prose that, where the interdependence is up to us to find, which kind of points to the hardest part about doing this work for me is like in this decentralized environment, sometimes the opportunities to depend on somebody are right there in front of me and I don't notice for whatever reason. There's a level of attention that I'm still trying to cultivate to that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I empathize with what you were saying, Nori, about it being hard to follow sometimes without a specific narrative. and it kind of reminded me sometimes of our Zoom calls, right? We go really deep. Everybody says really, impactful things, and then, like time's up, and I'm not sure where we got to, and and I didn't feel that way as I read the book, just as I was in the middle of certain sections. It's like a given chapter, I was like, well, you're done. And then, but she kept, she went on. And I think that was the part where it reminds me of our conversation sometimes. It's like, we got this, but everybody's got their own flavor on what they need to say about that, and I don't know. I'll stop. I was supposed to listen. I'm sorry. I forgot.
No, thanks for that. I mean, that's very insightful because I feel the same way sometimes. And yeah, we do love to gather. We do like to talk. And I think it's brought us all closer together as a community. Like I feel like I know all of you fairly well from kind of all the time we spend together in these conversations. No.
Yeah, and I'll tell you something. I had experience, and I guess I do have to just talk because it was really impactful. Like we have been without our car since December 23rd, right? It blew up. And we went days not knowing what to do because there was no mechanics. And then a friend of ours said, why don't you call this guy? Because I know he can help. And he's had it, over a month. And he loves this car. He was stunned that we had a car from 2004 that was in this good a shape. I mean, he fucking loves it. And he does this for, he fixes cars and flips them for a living. And, he announced this morning in a text message that he was done with it. And Kelly said, well, how much do we need to pay you? And he was like, oh, don't worry about it. He said, I just sold 2 cars, like I'm good. I wanted to do this to this car because he didn't just fix the blown engine, right? He didn't just replace the head gasket and make all that. He fixed every fucking little thing in this car, from like the drain tubes, along the runner, and it's like, and I was like, the friend who connected us, she's pretty well off. And I've been telling Kelly, like she paid him already. She's like, Kelly was like, no, I don't think so. I don't think so. And we get there, and we took like a lot of money. What we thought a fair price would be if he was really just kind of, I don't know, being shy about taking money, And then he kind of explained that his uncle somehow gets these car parts free. I mean, like stupid free, like $20 instead of $200. And he was working for his uncle. And so he was working in exchange for these parts for our car. And then that the rest of it was just for the love of it, because he just loved this car. And he had been wanting to know some things about this car. It's a Volvo. And our car gave him the opportunity. And I was like, man, this just sounds like everybody here in blockchain, right? And we went out. I'll wrap this up pretty quick, but we went on and talked a little bit. And he's one of us, right? Like he just works on cars for a living. He didn't know shit about blockchain, but he's one of us. And it was like, man, I said, dude, we've been looking for you for 11 years ever since we got this car, right? Because I had one guy say, no, I wouldn't work my car. Those hoses will give you cancer, and another guy we've heard the strangest things trying to find a mechanic for this car. And there he is. And he's like, y'all, right? Anyway, I just, it's like we're in the middle of this extended moment, and yet all these crazy things happen every day, and it's really got my head spinning lately, the pace of things and the both on the fast side and on the slow side. It's just an amazing experience right now.
That's an amazing story. Thank you for sharing that.
I'm wondering, looking at the first quote, it's Dan. Humans are unique. We compete when it isn't necessary. I'm wondering, that reminds me, I don't know if you remember the Eddie Murphy film Trading Places, where they take a tramp off the street and put him in a nice house and give him a highly paid job. And basically it's an experiment in the environment versus the whatever it is. But I'm wondering how much is kids from a young age are taught to compete rather than to collaborate. It's all about, it's about winning, isn't it? It's, you've got to do well in your tests. You've got to win the running race. You've got to be on the winning football team. And yeah, I'm wondering if we're conditioning people to compete with one another rather than work with one another and become interdependent and understand that there's a lot more to life than being the top dog with all the money, because if you're the top dog with all the money, you've probably exploited some people along the way. And how do you feel about that? So yeah, my two penny worth.
It's a beautiful point, Dan. I think it's super important, and I think it's actually something that the author didn't really consider maybe enough. I mean, she alludes to it, and she gives room for it. Also, through some of the works of the science fiction that she brings in. But I think we can't underestimate the power of what we've been taught about exclusivity, separation, competition, distance. I think that you're very right. We've been trained to think that way, so we think it's ubiquitous, and it. Again, based on the archaeological record, it's not ubiquitous at all. It's something that we've got to work out of our system, and there's no easy way to do it. And I think the best chance is to utilize motivation for personal gain. You do it because it feels good, but if you don't get that sense of it feeling good, then you have no reason to pursue it. So there's something powerful about working for others and contributing, which I believe, again, as you probably all know, is the other half of the story. And I think, like yin and yang, they always and only coexist, the giving and receiving. Otherwise, you're out of balance.
Steve.
Yeah, I'm just I read an essay a long time ago, and I'm curious if y'all are familiar with this thought that, like we live in a world that's basically functioning on a primarily Aristotelian viewpoint versus a Socratic viewpoint, and that, one's more kind of, just material, and the other one is a little bit more, thoughtful, like the way Socrates did things, like the Socratic method of teaching, like what James does, and we, like that, that derivation of all of Western society, at least, into this hard kind of competitive and deterministic way of going about things, like that's a choice. And it's, due to the nature of society, it's the choice most people don't get to make. It's the result, like they live in a world that's the result of that kind of thinking, never knowing that there was a choice. And I think that these are the things that make it hard to be a white man in America, right? Because it's hard to know how to fit in if, like what feels right to you is not what's right. And yet you see all of your bros, succeeding by going along with it. Like I really have I live without a lot of the things that the people in my immediate area take for granted, like buying a new 60 or a 50-inch TV this year and a 55-inch TV next year, because they've got the cash flow to blow on that kind of shit and they think it's important. And I don't want a job to do that kind of things. Like in my view, the cost benefits are totally flip-flop. What I lose by taking a job and not wanting those things is way more than the job's worth to me. It's much more interesting for me to spend my time, pursuing this kind of experience like we have here.
Thanks, Steve. Hey,
Yo, I'm assuming you can be able to hear me. I can see the
yes.
the okay, awesome. The green light going there. Yeah, to be honest, going back to the very beginning of this book club, James said that I was gonna just like quickly just like well, he didn't quite say this, but like a hot knife through butter, like just go through this book. But going back to what Anori just said, the kind of frantic nature of it to me has made it not that easy. So yeah, to be honest, like I love the ideas, but just the formatting or the presentation for me has made that difficult. And I suppose this kind of speaks to aspects that we've kind of touched on with regards to teaching, right? Some folks, with the same material, one person can sort of communicate it very differently compared to a different person. Yeah, and so to come back to the points which were made by let's see, by Dan and wait, who else's point was I gonna add on to? Yeah, I think it was Dan, which pointed to the game aspect of things. The first thing that came to mind actually when Nori referred to it, at the risk of referring to too many books, this book I really quite like because it's about ego, and I like the design of the book because again it plays on the whole idea of ego, right? The book is actually called The Status Game. It's in the tiny font up here, The Status Game, on human life and how to play it. So I think games are a tool, and any tool you can use it, either way, for good or for bad. One good example is Andrew Carnegie, who made a whole bunch of money and decided to write a book about how once you've done well for yourself, it's super important to give back, right? So, I think in life there's certain feedback loops, and maybe this is dependent on nature versus nurture, maybe, which is what I think someone earlier was trying to allude to. Nature versus nurture, where maybe your biological chemistry, hardware, software, etc., leans more to one side in terms of being more empathetic and more wanting to give others, or the opposite, right? So perhaps there is that to it, but I feel like the overarching thing here, in my opinion, is within the game you have elements like th- there's there's a documentary about two climbers who are trying to go up I think Yosemite mountain, or climb a particular thing on it. One of them was doing really well, the other wasn't doing so well, and the one who was going for it was doing well. uh Decided it won't be fun if he just went all the way to the top and his friend couldn't come along, so he actually came back down to help his friend. And the very next day, psychologically, the friend was able to go past the particular point in the climb where that he was finding difficult, and then after that just really kind of dominated that wall thereafter. So I feel there's aspects to that within the game where it's not fun in the same way, kind of like what Elon is doing. Like, he could be, on a private island, but he's like, I'm gonna try and fix Twitter because I enjoy just, engaging with people. And you know we don't have a fair game if, politically, technology and sort of economics really take away, make the playground fundamentally unfair. So yeah, I just want to sort of throw that in. I suppose one quick last point here has to do with debt-based society, which kind of adds on to this, because we've evolved so far. Well, evolved makes it seem like it's somehow biological, um, emergent property, but we've, I suppose, created man-made structures, which are one of which fundamentally is this debt-based society, where we've created rules in the game where we're kicking the can down the road, and such functions that we've added to the game of life are unhealthy. So again, going back to agency within this game, like a tool, it can go either way, but our agency, we're then able to tap into that to rebalance things.
Thanks. And I just wanted to check in quickly. I know I saw Matthias join the queue and then he dropped out. I just want to make sure. Did you want to say something or did you change your mind?
I'm okay, thank you. Okay, keep on going.
I think that is a very interesting point that A brings up, and it sounds in aggregate kind of like we as Western society have agreed to allow competition for basic survival needs, whereas there's other understandings of deep community where they can compete about all sorts of different things, but when it comes to your survival, food, shelter, that's not a subject for competition. That's a subject for parity and making sure everybody's okay and taken care of. Getting back to the idea that the whole group is judged by the worst among them, as as a self analysis of any community. So like the fundamental idea of taking care of one another doesn't have to conflict with competition necessarily. Anyway.
Mm-hmm. Very good points. James, I see you're making a little graph down here. And I thought it might be a good time to jump into these. When I looked at these in the book, I was like a little bit dismayed that they didn't reflect my experience of the chapter. I must have focused on other things and missed a lot of other things, but this kind of made me go, oh, this is what the chapter's about, really, or at least what the author intended. So I thought it'd be interesting to go through these. So the assessment of interdependence and decentralization asks questions like, who do you lean on? Who leans on you? Explore the places where those lists overlap and where they don't, and how can you increase mutual relationship? And another question, are all of your needs met? If yes, how? If not, why not? And then interestingly, did you answer either of the questions above as if it's all your responsibility? If not, try it. How does that feel? If yes, answer again as if nothing happens with you alone. Who makes work happen in your group? Me? Or a small group, core group of us? Or everyone shares in the work? Does everyone take vacation time and weekends where you work? Do you feel comfortable using the sick and or vacation time you earn? If you disappeared tomorrow because aliens chose you as the ambassador from Earth to the Alliance of Evolved Planets, for instance, how would your organization respond? 1, close its doors. 2, period of chaos and power struggle. 3, redistribute your workload and be overwhelmed. Or 4, redistribute the work and adjust for capacity so that they're still on path. And then how does your answer to the question above feel? And what could you do to increase the decentralization strength in your group? I thought those were all really interesting questions that made me reflect on the topic of interdependence and decentralization and framing it against those questions. But what do people think? What are your groups and organizations like? Are they interdependent and decentralized, or are they not there yet? Are there things that you want to move towards, or are you happy where things are? What does that bring up for people? And I'm curious, James, you put this graph up. I was wondering if you had an exercise for this, or was it just kind of re-envisioning it from this kind of polar kind of thing to a kind of a graph view?
Yeah, you the way you introduced your experience of seeing those words in the same place just got me thinking, and I wanted to just have that to come back to later.
Mhm.
Interesting. I also appreciate what you shared about your experience of reading this assessment, because I shared that experience it partially, and I also it shines a light on. I can only speak for myself, but everything I read it these days with the lens of this work we're doing in blockchain, and that's both really an interesting thing, right? Because everything references, I always find new reasons to say why I'm here. But on the other hand, I'm certain that I'm missing real messages, that people are actually trying to get across because of this particular lens that I happen to be viewing things through right now. And so I wonder to what extent not completely this not completely aligning with what I read. My understanding of what I read is in part because of this lens I'm always looking through.
Mhm. Good point. And I see A's got his hand up, but Om also had his physical hand up earlier. I'll give you space to go home.
Real quickly, I don't see interdependence as opposed to decentralization. In fact, within a system, maximal decentralization can improve opportunities for interdependence to come to the front. So yeah, I don't see them as opposed to each other.
Mm-hmm. And I appreciate that viewpoint. And this graph makes it really clear to me too. So thanks, James, for that. It makes it kind of two different scales. And then a group can be highly interdependent and highly decentralized, or good on one, but not on the other, and the other way or two. So two different axes to focus on. Yeah. So thanks for that, A.
Yeah, I was actually gonna chime in and say that, yeah, thinking about both of those aspects in relationship to it them being represented in a at least two-dimensional way here, I think is quite helpful. Um, the thing that came to mind, earlier, during this conversation is the idea of no man being an island, and yeah, so in the context of all this, I think, and referring back to the game idea as well. For example, in the who makes work happen in your group question, you know, some of this, relates to one's nature of how they interact socially, right? It's like, do I want to feel like a burden or not, that kind of thing. Which makes sense, from the standpoint of different minds, right? Going back to nature versus nurture, hardware, software, you know, yeah, in terms of, I suppose, brain matter and electrical signals thereafter. Yeah. So yeah, I just want to sort of highlight, I think, the idea, well, at least the way I see these two, interdependence is more about the relationships and decentralization is more about the resources. And much like I don't, within a graph, you've got links and nodes or edges, vertices, etc. It's a dynamic relationship where, yeah, it's more defined by the actions which occur in an ongoing manner, where sort of supply demand or the equivalent of market forces are affecting them. And one of the key things that keeps that game in check are status games, right? Status games, so I suppose, in reference to ego here as well. But yeah, a small core group of us would be my answer there, because I think at the end of the day, it's whenever there's an issue, there's only, again, market forces or dynamics force it to a specific group of people who have enough resources, right, from skill sets to incentives or motivation to solve that particular problem. And also the other factors like communication, inertia, and so on. Matthias made a really good point the other day of, basically the exponential nature of the cost of communication as a group grows, which I was thinking, like, Catalyst really did not think about that when they were just trying to be the biggest DAO or whatever it was that they're trying to do in the early days. But yeah, I just wanted to sort of quickly throw those thoughts in there, because I thought they related in all those kind of different dimensions.
Mhm.
And the lever thing, going back to the beginning of this whole conversation, when James said there's a few people, but the quote that came to me, I forget, it might be Plato, I don't know. So an historical figure, I think Greek, is sort of attributed to, where the person said, give me a long enough lever and I can move anything, right? So in a way, technology here is a lever, and very few people can, like in this particular context, very few people can be able to get together and use tech as a lever to be able to affect a lot more change. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Ian. I think it was
You're welcome,
Archimedes
Matthias.
that said that.
There we go. Yes. Yeah, I was like, it's the same guy who did the bath, the water, the displacement, but I could not remember his name. So thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you, Matthias.
Harsha.
I just wanted to speak about the level of interdependence. And I'm starting to think that this is just an opinion, but I'm starting to think there is no getting away from interdependence. But when we are measuring dependence, we measure like the value exchange and see if it is fair. And that seems like a fair scale for measuring dependence to me, specifically because we did that graph thing. So yeah.
Mhm. Steve.
Tremendous, it sounds like to me. And then you follow this, what if I'm not here? What if somebody used to would go on? And it's like, that's tricky, right? Because I can give out this experience interdependence, and that people
Hey,
we
can you
talk
hear
to
us?
frequently.
Hey, Steve, it's really coming through broken up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're breaking
Steve,
up a lot.
try
Oh,
doing
really?
this. Try leave computer audio, and then rejoin. That tends to fix the issue I find on my end.
I think Steve's driving in his car, so he may be in a poor reception area.
Is new Volvo.
Yes. All right, maybe we can try again, Steve, in a few minutes when you get further down to better reception. Dan, you want to go next?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was looking at the interdependence decentralization graph, and it made me think. I don't know if any of you guys have seen it. If you haven't, look on YouTube. Look for a murmuration of starlings. They are all one single bird in the middle of a flock of thousands is interdependent on the birds around it, but it's completely decentralized, and it is the most amazing thing to see. There are literally thousands of birds moving almost as one, like a wave through the sky, and that's where we need to get to. We need to get to that level of decentralization. And there you go. And if we can work towards that level of interdependence where we're not trying to be dependent on everybody, but we have a group of people that we work with who have their own group, which isn't the same as our group. So I might be in a group with James and Matthias and Nori, but Nori might be in that group, but he might also be in a group with Harsha and A, and James might be in a group that includes Juan and Newman, and so on. So that ultimately everything is interdependent, but not, it's too much to be an organization of thousands that are all talking to one another. You'd never get anything done. But if you have a small group working on something that's related to the other things that are connected, if that makes sense. I don't know if it does, but okay, my 2 pennies worth anyway.
Thanks for that, Dan. And yeah, I think that metaphor of murmurations or fish shoaling or any of those other emergent phenomena from millions of different individual holons comes up a lot. And I think it's something worth thinking about. Yeah, how that works. Juan.
Thank you, Nori. This book is awesome. I think is you know, it was, I see it a very difficult book to write, mostly because it is a collection of other people's thoughts and ideas internalized by her in her own way. And you know, going back to what Dan was saying, and the graph is great. I think not only we can grab not only interdependence and decentralization, but also delegating and doing. There must be a way to put when we lean on others and when others lean on me in a graph way. So the only way to accomplish that is to have a united vision, a unique reason to do things, that as the flake of birds go around, everybody count with the other, count on the other without any type of just doing. And it caught my attention that this book analogizes decentralization by delegating. And precisely delegating is one of the pillars to achieve inside-out balance, which has been my work for many years. Not my work, but a way to express the things that I believe are key for us to be able to give. The inner peace, where all we do solidifies. And I can continue talking about trees that are tremendous example of the decentralization and delegation. But I want to have someone else say something else.
Thanks, Juan. Yeah, and that was in the chapter is the image of the oak trees with the intertwined root systems. They all support one another and can't be blown down. Yeah. Hey.
Yeah, I think we've only got like 2 more minutes before transitioning to the next section. But yeah, so the point that I just quickly wanted to add here is has to do with the network, right? One just shared some interesting thoughts around network, and I just wanted to add on to that. One other type of tree called the pando tree, Pando, is a type of tree which basically on the surface they all appear to be, a bunch of different trees inside a forest, but there can be thousands upon thousands of them, which actually the root system beneath the ground are all interconnected. And it's quite a beautiful reference in this regard from a sort of biological standpoint. They're basically, in a way, like one organism, right? Because all the roots are sort of interconnected. So yeah, looking to nature for such references, I think, is helpful. But the key thing that I wanted to sort of drive home here with my point is that the network is super important, right? Going back to the point that I was making about Elon and Twitter, society, or even just any organism, right? Like if I'm not that well versed right now, but biologically, I know that if your body is not sending correct signals, not just to the brain, but to even other parts, like that's the recipe for, or a recipe for disaster. So having the signal that's going through the network, any network, is super important to keep that open. So all this conversation about freedom of speech, etc., is super important, right? Because without that, we have poor signal, which leads to bad decisions being made, and ultimately, decay and other bad stuff, death, etc. So yeah, I just want to drive home the importance of the network, and that brings us to the 10-minute mark point. Thanks.
Dan, final comment, and then we'll move into a section of what's it called? Next most elegant steps, if we want, or we can continue the conversation if there's still lots to talk about.
All right, I'll be fairly quick. Earlier we put up Aristotle versus Socrates' worldviews, and next to it I put George Orwell versus Aldous Huxley. And what A was just saying about the communication being open. George Orwell's view in 1984 was that the population would be controlled by concealing the truth from them, and Aldous Huxley in Brave New World says that the population will be controlled by drowning the truth in a sea of irrelevance. And I think we're very much in that situation at the moment. All the politicians are trying to hide stuff, and they're creating trivial rubbish to hide the truth if it does come out. So yeah, having a truthful, clear line of communication is very important. Right, on to next most elegant steps.
Thanks, Sam. I saw you put that sticky in way early, and then tying that back to our conversation with A just now was really great. All right, so we usually have next most elegant steps. Is there anything from the conversation today that leads to that, as far as interdependence and decentralization for what we do here?
Oh, go ahead, Juan.
Oh, no, go ahead. Go ahead. You first, please. Go ahead, James.
This for some, yeah, thinking about these axes next to each other and thinking about networks of trees, and Nori, even, Nori and I have had this ongoing conversation about how we build impact networks, and just putting a lot of different pieces together here. It strikes me, and even Dan, to what you're saying about, these methods of population control, I think both are relevant, like you're saying, and parallel to them, or maybe embedded in each, is the power of convincing people that they are alone, right? And so whether you do that from group to group, one way that there's governments have a history of staying in power is to make less powerful groups fight against each other. So obviously they're unable to form the coalitions necessary, right? So we know about that. And in the very same way, like the Pando network is interesting because that's like a clone, right? I think there's a pretty interesting, there's some kind of story to tell there, I guess, about open source software, maybe, right? And how you can make a copy of something, and or node operators, right? All running the same software to support the protocol. But I can't help thinking about in the more general case, like of the forest, trees had to stand on their own first, and then with their roots now established, were able to create this network. And so, like, which isn't to say that we all must, everybody has to fend for themselves until they're ready to participate in that network. I think part of the work we get to do here, especially as we bridge to tokenomics, is say, how do you build new branches and connecting roots at the same time, right? Is it possible to do both at once? But what I know for sure is that if a bunch of like acorns sat around talking about what good trees they were going to be, they would never amount to anything. And I want to bring that metaphor to other collaborative work I'm trying to do and say, hey, if we start to grow these trees, then these networks of roots can form. And we know, like, we have to trust this part, that nature gives us this metaphor that maybe one day we will live up to. So those are incomplete thoughts, but I'm so grateful for this conversation to kind of provide those metaphors and think from these perspectives. And I'm going to carry the bar graph around with me. Thanks.
Thank you, James. Well, yes, I just want to make a short comment. Just thinking vision. How much of our vision relates to others, to other people's vision? How much that relates to what we are doing here? And I think that's an elegant step that we have to follow every single day. And want to put it on a sticky note, but I want to say first.
Thanks, man. Hey.
Yeah. I can just imagine, a bunch of acorns chilling and just, talking about imagining what great big, I don't know, redwoods or whatever they would be. Yeah, that just made me chuckle a bit.
Next step is to make that animation.
Exactly. Precisely. This is something which I feel like after every session, I personally sort of come back to, and I don't know, selfishly maybe because I'm interested in finding out different nodes. In this case, nodes are being represented by just media, or in this case specifically books, or not just books, even other things. Because as James referred to a particular book when Ohm was talking, I forget which one it is, but anyway, the point I want to make is just the intertextual relationship of different works, I think, is important, right? Going back to interdependent, yeah, I think it's quite on topic here with regards to the network, and pointing to autonomously finding pots of value or nodes of value that one can choose to look into, and if they get value from it, then find it valuable and then recommend it to others, so that others can find that particular node, right? So in this particular case, it's books. I mentioned a few, well, two really, and yeah, so I think if a book comes to mind for anyone around, do feel free to just mention it, or even add it into the next most elegant steps, so that people can just kind of look into that and see the parallels that the different works draw.
Thanks, A. Anybody else have any closing thoughts or elegant next steps?
Tom's got a hand up.
I have
Yeah,
a really
well-
short one.
Yeah.
Really short one, guys. Is the fact that all we do here is based on a gimbal, and the thing is, everything that they say, all the work that James does is totally related to that balance, and it's key for us to understand that. So I don't feel bad leaning on him to learn and being on his meetings without possibly not providing the return of investment that he's doing on his time and effort. I think that's going to show up somewhere if we continue planting that vision that is a gimbal that is driving us. That's it for me.
Beautiful closing thought. Thanks, Juan. All right. I think
Here,
we're
Om's
at.
had a hand up for. Do you want a quick one?
Oh, sorry, I don't have
going
full
first
view
over
of
here.
everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, all these ideas are the exact reason and the years of effort that went into making Has Needs. And the metaphor for that, I would suggest, is that it's very important to cultivate the soil rather than pre-design any trees. When you get a soil that works, then the trees take care of themselves.
I've got some Has Needs relevant contract patterns that I'm excited to share with you. Finally, we're getting there.
I love that Newman's out for his walk. I was going to do the same, but it's harder to facilitate when you're walking. So I took one for the team today.
Thanks, Nori.
By the way, thank you guys for sharing with me that walking. That's awesome. I did not realize that until I reflected about that meeting last week. Thank you, Nori and Newman. Oh, by the way, you are walking.
Yep.
Yeah. I was like, oh, I don't have time. I've got to do a walk. I've got to do all this stuff. And I was like, wait a minute. I can walk and listen and talk at the same time.
You sacrifice the mirror though.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, that is true. I will catch back up with it. It sounds like a phenomenal conversation, and likewise, it's a lot of appreciation and gratitude.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks everybody for making this space and bringing yourselves to it.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you, Nori.
We'll pick it up at tomorrow for another one. Nori, I know you can't make it, but we'll keep you posted.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks.
Thanks. Looking forward to it.
Take care, everybody.